This is the Business Owners IT Podcast with Anthony Gerasch and Ryan Carter, where tomorrow's technology meets today's conversation.
Hi, I'm Tony Gerasch.
And I'm Ryan Carter, and this is the Business Owners IT Podcast.
A podcast where we discuss tips, tricks, and solutions for business owners involving all things tech.
So here we go, into our deep dive a little deeper into CIS Control number 7, Continuous Vulnerability Management. This is the control where it focuses on the ongoing identification, assessment, and remediation of vulnerabilities within an organization's systems and software to reduce the risk of exploitation by hackers. Tony, you want to take that away for us?
Sure. So there's some key aspects of it that I'm going to list out here, and hopefully I don't put them out of order today. But anyways, it's got my paper here as usual. One is regular vulnerability scans. We'll talk about that in deep. And then vulnerability prioritization. Number 3, timely patching and remediation. Automated tools for monitoring, tracking and documentation, and then third-party and vendor monitoring. And it all pertains to vulnerabilities. So
what is a vulnerability?
So a vulnerability is a known exploit, or sometimes there'll be a vulnerability that's not been exploited.
Ooh, the 0 day.
0 day, right? A 0 day would be an example of that, where they find it in advance and it's not been exploited, but it needs to be patched. So a vulnerability is just basically bad software that gives the person access to be able to do something they're not supposed to be able to do.
Yep. It's leveraged into a system that you're not supposed to normally have.
So that's what it is. So the first one, regularly vulnerability scans, and they say, right, my notes say anyways, continuously scan system, network, and applications for vulnerability using automated tools. Regular scans help detect weakness and newly identified vulnerabilities. So typically, we're working with small businesses, and we're using a tool called Tenable. Nessus Tenable. That's what we do our vulnerability scans with. And it's constantly a struggle. I'm always asking, hey, can you do an internal, external vulnerability scan? So there's 2 different types of scans, right? There's the ones, what can I see from the outside? Mm-hmm. What do I have access to from the internet? And then there's the internal one. What are the vulnerabilities on the internal networks? And there typically is a lot more these days vulnerabilities on internal networks than there is on the external.
Yeah.
So there's no access from the external to the internal. There's not supposed to be anybody, but if somebody's in your system, right, then they have access to those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, a lot of those external vulnerabilities have gone away now that we got cloud-based access for websites and stuff like that, so people aren't hosting them on their internal corporate network anymore.
Yeah, but still, the cloud is your data on somebody else's computers, right?
Yep.
So Microsoft and AWS and Oracle, they all have to be doing continuous vulnerability scanning. If they, because somebody could install malware on there.
Oh, yeah. You know who else is doing continuous vulnerability scanning?
Who?
The attackers.
Yeah, that's what they use, right?
It's nonstop.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So the vulnerability scanners we use is the same one used by the attackers. You get in, you run the vulnerability scan, boom, that's what we need to attack. And the first thing they attack? Printers, copy machines, right? So if I'm going to be an attacker, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to the copy machine. I'm going to the Canon copy machine that has all the users in it that I'm scanning to, that has credentials in it. I'm looking at it.
Yep. So good story. We might be able to put the link in the notes on this because I'm going to get all the numbers wrong, but it just popped in my head. So someone at one point set up a Windows XP computer and just put it on the internet. And this was recently, like in the past few months, maybe a year. Just put it on the internet. See how fast it can get hacked, because obviously it's super vulnerable. And I think it was like in less than 2 minutes, someone was already in that machine, which means that's how much that the internet is being scanned, or the external devices on the internet are being scanned. It's it's unreal how fast that machine was taken.
Right, and if that machine's on your private network and it has access to the internet on the public network and it's sitting there, then they have access to everything on the private network.
Yes, sir, they do.
So number 2, vulnerability prioritization, right? So that's when we know we got a vulnerable, and then we have to figure out what the risk is.
Yep, and just to go on that, we prioritize the vulnerabilities for our clients. Nessus does a good job of scanning. They tell you the criticals, the highs, and the mediums. And I always say, knock out the criticals first. That's how our first prioritization, criticals, highs, and then the mediums. The mediums are always kind of always there, but we start working on those. And if we can get it to where our scans only show that there's mediums, that means we're doing a pretty good job of keeping that network safe.
Yeah, and then there's the thing that what you call acceptable risk, right? And we'll do an internal scan at a manufacturer, for example, and they're going to have a whole bunch of old CN machines. And you'll see these CN machines with Windows NT, Windows XP, Windows 2000, Windows ME. I've seen them all. They're there. We know they're there. We try to isolate them, but I mean, it's an acceptable risk to them. They're not going to they don't want to spend, sometimes in excess of 10 grand to update these computers, right? They're just small manufacturers. So, but, when it comes down to some of the new stuff with CMMC, they're going to have to, some of these manufacturers are going to have to fix that stuff. It's part of it. So, yep. Timely patching and remediation. So, if we're doing IT for you, right, unique is, we're patching systems continuously after they come out. Typically, what's our patch schedule? I mean, they come out on Tuesdays and...
Yep, so the second Tuesday of every month, Microsoft pushes theirs out, and we wait 7 days, and then we automatically do the patching. Except for when we talked about the 0 days or criticals, then that is patched right away. We wait the 7 days just to make sure systems don't go down. For some reason, printers always stop working after a Microsoft update, or connections to RDP servers or something like that that's internal may have issues, so we always test it out before we do so.
Yeah. So, we wait 7 days, like you said, because we don't want to take everybody down. We want to make sure there's always people that patch right away.
Yep.
So,
yep. And the blogs and the internet do a really good job too of putting down problems too. So within those 7 days, we can narrow down what we need to do for our clients.
Yep. So number 4 is automated tools for monitoring. Well, this one's a little bit, more, more tricky, right? Because, there's not, small businesses can't afford some of the tools that other people can, right? So, they don't necessarily have the continuous monitoring.
Well, the small fix for that is it's not continuous, but we do run, I think, every 2 weeks scans on your networks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But some of these tools that are continuous, they do get pretty pricey. You're right.
Yeah. So, tracking and documentation, so track the life cycle of vulnerabilities from discovery to remediation and maintain logs, identify vulnerabilities of vulnerable activities. Actions taken include patching and applied system updates. So in our case, the way we do that, right, we're your IT department, we're going to create tickets for it, right? And, we're going to create a ticket for the each vulnerability that's found. It's going to be assigned to somebody, and then, we're going to remediate it. And if we can't remediate it, then we're going to meet with the client, talk to them about it, and they have to say whether or not it's an acceptable risk.
Yep.
And, again, you'll see a lot of times, I've been a client recently, old VMware. I mean, these people have this old VMware that's very, very vulnerable, but they're not doing anything about it, even if you tell them.
Yep. Yeah. So, sometimes they have to get a new server to go up, and that gets pricey, and they decline at that point.
Yeah. And then number 6, this is a good one, right? Third-party and vendor monitoring. So here's where we're going to get in and talk about, third-party software, right, and their abilities and their updates to your system with vulnerabilities. So, for example, a lot of people use Adobe. They could have vulnerabilities, right? They have to be patched. Google Chrome has to be patched. There's tons of third-party software out there. That's the biggest part of the vulnerabilities, right? Is these 0 days that are potentially in software.
Yeah, and I think this is a second or third control is to make sure you have an inventory of your software.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to roll into the reasons why you do that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So you got to have an inventory of it if you want to be able to know if there's a vulnerability for it. A lot of times you're going to hear about the major vulnerabilities, right? You're not going to hear about the small ones. The software that might be business software that are people using that have vulnerabilities that are small.
Yeah.
The big guys usually, your Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, they get a lot of vulnerabilities. Adobe products, there might be CAD products out there with vulnerabilities too. You just don't know.
Yeah. Especially with some of the older software that's no longer maintained.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Right. For sure. I bet you there's still some people out there using Flash. I mean, it's been.
I get alerts every once in a while.
Yeah. So, all right. So basically, you have any more to add to this?
To that one? No, go ahead.
Okay. So, the objective here with this control, right, and it's a good control, right, is to minimize the attack surface by continuously identifying, vulnerabilities inside your network. So that's what you're trying to do here. You're looking for exploits. Instead of being in a break-fix mentality, right, you're in a managed kind of service mentality where we're looking for these things before they're attacked. We're looking to stop the attack, right? We're looking for these things to basically not bring any of attention to ourselves. That's what the whole purpose of it is,
Yeah, and with that continuous, monitoring, like you said, that brings me kind of to our tip of the week, which is it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You do have to, have the human looking at it. You have to have something that's monitoring continuously or every few weeks or something along those lines. And you must act first on anything found. Act as soon as possible on anything found. And also the one thing too is if you have a scanner set up like our Nessus scanner, you make sure that scanner is scanning the right things. Because if you just set it and forget it for too long, it may just start wandering off and scanning something, or you change something on your network and it's just scanning nothing. And you're getting these great results back that you don't know that you're getting.
Right. And again, when you have these scanners, you also got to look at your network, because you might be scanning one network, which is the internal private network, but we might have some other networks there that are segmented off that still need to be scanned.
That can get to that private network.
Yeah. So, some more complicated, a little bit more complicated things. We might have 3 or 4 VLANs, and the reason we use VLANs is because we want to stop the vulnerabilities from like telephones.
Yep. Segment that off. Correct.
Yep. All right. Well, anything else?
I'm good. Take us away.
Yep. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining the Business Owners IT podcast, and hope to see you next week.
We'll see you next week where we talk about CIS Control 8 Audit Log Management.
Unique computing solutions. Your IT challenges solved.